All right, we're back for round 2, if you were here before. So this is a talk on DevOps for Drupal. Just checking to make sure everybody is excited about that one for this. So we're gonna get this kicked off. How many sat in the one before? How many are new? I'm recognizing some faces. Okay, yeah. So I might speed a little bit more quickly through the front here on this. So what are we going to talk about here? Obviously, we're making an assumption. You're doing a project, doing multiple projects, or going to do a project with Drupal. You're looking for a better way to build and deploy a site and infrastructure, application infrastructure that goes with Drupal. How many? You've heard of DevOps? Maybe, maybe not. Or automated configuration management, or various things therein. Want to know about them and learn more. So what are we going to cover here? We're going to give you a couple things. We're going to give you some experience from us, unfiltered, opinions and thoughts unfiltered on this. Our points of view, both development side of things, operations side of things. And what do we want you to take out of here? We want you to know that DevOps matters. We really believe in this. We do this every day. It's part of our business, and have folks who focus on this. And we think it's important for Drupal. We're going to talk about that as well. And not just the, we're not going to talk just details of tools in any way. In fact, we're going to be fairly light on that. We're going to talk a lot more about sort of why DevOps matters and the concepts of it and where the tools come into play on that. And how the tools are used for things in terms of automation of steps and what's doing it. Bottom line is how this makes your life better as a Drupal developer, Drupal administrator, Drupal project manager, owner on that. We had a bunch of other presentations that we were doing. I think most of them are now over. On them. We have one more on continuous integration tomorrow, but we did some on testing with Selenium, debugging Drupal, mobile. Some of them's out there, and they're hopefully all got recorded and loaded up. So who are we? So for those who weren't in there, we're from Promet Source. We're based out of Chicago, but we have offices in a couple other places, and folks distributed U.S. and globally. So we work with distributed teams on doing this. Open source development, dedicated focus to Drupal is what we do and work on every day. Custom applications, mobile application development, custom mobile application development as well. We also have a practice areas in DevOps and 24/7 support. So the reason I point this out as important is that this gives us, we get a lot of information from organizations that we work with on Drupal, providing us feedback on challenges they're running into, things that they're doing, and it's varied. So we try to take those things that we learn, the challenges, the needs, lessons learned that folks are doing, and feed those back into how we're working with Drupal, how we're working with community with Drupal, and how we're working with other organizations to do that. So really quick, who I am, Director of Products at Promet. I focus a lot on sort of kind of product building approaches. We sort of have this mindset when we think of Drupal about sort of the ability to ship a site the same way you're shipping a product. This comes to the way we think about developing it from an agile standpoint. It comes to the way we think about doing DevOps for Drupal as well. I've done IT for a long period of time in a bunch of different roles. I've worked on proprietary enterprise CMS software market as well, then converted over to open source, saw the light, if you will. I've also done a lot of product development and management at startup companies as well.
I'm Johnny Fox. I'm the Director of Development for Promet. I also manage the DevOps team. Sometimes, as I say, I'm a recovering developer, so I'm easily distracted. So I am a certified Scrum Master. Prior to working with Promet, I ran a manufacturing business for 15 years. The last 10 years, I've been involved in technology, .NET technologies, C#, iOS. Also worked and managed real-time stock market data operations for a data company where we manage servers and work on the team that works with Promet for developing our chef strategy.
So we do have some connections here in Iowa, and have done a fair bit of spent a fair bit of time out here, both with organizations we work with, and then also try to spend some time with the community as well. So Grinnell College, University of Iowa, UNI, are folks on that. You guys, how many people? Couple years experience with Drupal in the room? Anybody going back to like version 4, 5? Oh yeah.
All right.
Anybody a Shaolin master? One? Awesome. Anybody totally new to Drupal or just a year or two experience? Okay. On that. How many people are working for as a consultant or a consulting company or anything? How many are working in an organization? University, company, okay. How many developers? How many sysadmins? How many are both? Yeah, that's the person lying on the floor because they changed production. They're dead. How many are this guy? Demanding that you get new releases to the site 2 weeks ago. That's probably me. I'm probably that guy. So DevOps, and what is it? What's the background of it? How many folks are familiar? Anybody doing DevOps on a regular basis are familiar with kind of the practice principles? Totally new to it then? The rest? Okay. Anybody have heard of it before? Yes? Okay, good. So DevOps, number one that I like to say is, culture. This is as simple as get your developers, get your operations team, stick them in a room, lock them in a room, whatever you're going to do on there, and get them working together. This is about breaking down the silos that have kind of typically been there between operations and development teams and really getting them to work together and collaborate together and solve problems together. One of these things, again, that we say for a key concept here is, you'll hear this, is infrastructure as code. How many people have heard that term with DevOps before? Okay. So this is a key part of what it's about from this. This is getting everything that you are doing to define your infrastructure and getting that into code the same way your application is in code. And what are we after here? We say higher deployment rates, faster releases, cutting down the time on that, things like reliability, stability, knowing this is going to work. These are all key things that are there in that. And there are several patterns that we see and that we talk about a lot in DevOps. Getting environments available early in the development cycle, not waiting way down the path to do this, not spending huge amounts of time ramping up development cycles, especially when you're thinking about onboarding developers into a project over a period of time. You do not want that to take a long time. And we're going to talk about why that is, the kind of excuses we hear about that, how to address that with DevOps. You can see kind of in the diagram there, shortening feedback, not having a long period of time between when development work is done, when it is pushed forth, when the operations team is involved, and then waiting for feedback. You'll hear this say this. You do not want your first push to production to be the one when you are going to launch. Anybody done that before? Waited all the way till launch time to actually test out how production was going to be?
Not by choice.
Yeah, not by choice. Not fun. And then reuse. Getting deployment down so it's reused. Here's what DevOps is not. It's not about tools. It's not about some, procured set of scripts, other things that have been built over time. I've talked with many organizations. I've worked in several organizations where we've done this. We have spent enormous amounts of time, customizing various scripts and procuring things to do things that, kind of sort of held together to get things done. The tools don't fix everything. Said, you guys know what fixes everything. It's duct tape. That's it. If you don't have that, it's not going to be the tools. But the tools do reinforce concepts. They reinforce principles. They reinforce how a team can work together using the same things. So why do we think this is important? Not having standard practices around your development and operations put you in this place where you're going to have one-off environments. You're going to have complicated manual steps. Those will fail. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but they will fail. And generally at the time when you least can afford it, they will fail spectacularly. You got to go faster. Has anybody ever been on a project where they've been told, hey, take 3 more months to get that done? Yeah, maybe. Okay, yeah, there is that. No, I hear you. But generally, the move that you see now is that things must be done faster. You've got to be able to ship your site, as we like to say, just like you could ship a version of a product, and you've got to be able to rely on that. The other thing we like to point out is if you think about your environments, development, testing, staging, production, various levels of development, testing, staging, production, they're all production to somebody at some point. Even your local development environment is kind of production to you as a developer. You need to think about that and think about how that impacts that. Here's the bottom line. Drupal is not different than any other application stack technology that's being worked on today. Everyone is headed down this path. It's where you are on that path and how you're getting there that is what's changing. When I often talk to a lot of new organizations coming in and looking at Drupal or that we're starting to work with, we kind of start distilling all of the stuff that they have, how all their systems are set up, how they're all managing things. I often ask them the question, hey, if you could erase all this stuff today and start building new, what would you be doing? Most of the time, they either might say, I have no idea, which is why they're probably working with us, or hopefully working with us. Or a lot of times they'll say, yeah, we'd be doing it like, the startup out in the valley is. We'd be building everything in the cloud. We'd be putting, everything automated in terms of how we're building our applications. We'd have all of our stuff, together so that we could, test it in an automated fashion. You can't do those things if you don't start taking these steps. So here's a couple scenarios that we often see in here. Johnny says,
Hey, you said this working on your local, man. What's that?
The developer's like, yeah, works with my dev. And the sysadmin comes back, gets pinged, says, got to go check it out, comes back, I don't know, what, a couple hours later, a couple days later, whatever time he comes back and is like, these are not the same. Dev and prod are different. Somebody went off and changed prod, didn't document what was done. Somebody went off and made some change in dev or staging, and it's not the same. These are different. Here's another great one. In fact, I just saw one the other day. It wasn't Drupal, it was some other piece, but the great, totally well-written blog post with steps to install. You can say this is installing Drupal on Amazon or whatever it is, and they will just have all these detailed steps. And I'm going to sit there and I'm going to copy and paste, the 50 or 100 steps that they carefully wrote out for me and repeat that, multiple times to get, the configuration done. That's helpful if I really want to understand how they were going about building this thing. That is not helpful at all if I don't care. I just want a working environment. So how did we get down this path? How did we get started in this in the first place at Promet? We started on the operations side. We were looking at this largely through sort of the sysadmin eyes from the start, and we were saying, hey, we've got some problems. A lot of it is just big time sinks that were happening, inconsistent environments, inconsistent problems, and then this was impacting a lot of work that was happening out there. So typical things that were happening is just manual config all over the place. Development not same as production, not knowing what's going on in different environments. Some change would be made, modification would be made, documentation wouldn't get updated. Basically too much customization happening and not tracking of this. Here's my favorite one. Typing faster. It's not going to solve anything. Just being able to SSH faster around the boxes is not going to solve the problem. And being able to discover what was happening in an environment, discovering what was happening in a client's organization's environment was not that. So what do we do? Well, we actually had an advantage. We were able to look internal because we realized, hey, we were already doing work to solve this problem. We just weren't doing it directly in Drupal. We have an office out in the Bay Area, And we were doing DevOps work out there. We just weren't doing it around Drupal technology stack at that point. And we said, hey, let's start doing configuration management. Same thing that we're doing there for other companies on a consulting basis, and let's eat our own dog food and do it for ourselves. Because that never happens where you realize that as a company you're doing something and providing a service to somebody else, but you're not doing it yourself. Well, that's what we found out. So we started with Chef. They have orange in their logo color, and kind of, we do too, so that was why we picked them. No, actually had nothing to do with that. One of our sysadmins out in the Bay Area who was leading in DevOps and deeply into Chef, Marius, said, hey, let's deploy this. Let's get everybody up to speed. Let's get everybody on the same team. I'm going to show you guys what I'm doing for our customers, and let's apply it to all of our customers. We also found out that Chef as a tool, a configuration management tool, was pretty good. So how many people have heard of Chef? Couple. How many people have used it? Couple? Okay. All right. So it's a tool for config management, for automating it, programmatically being able to provision and automate configurations of that. And what's great about it, and other configuration management tools as well, is that it's a code base. So everything that we put into configuration management in Chef goes into Get. Just like all of our Drupal. Even. Yeah, just like all of our Drupal code, right? Goes into Get. All of it? Yes. So then what that allows you to do with a tool like Chef is you can take the code repo, get whatever backups, get whatever, cloud, bare metal, whatever it is, and you can rebuild your entire stack, from OS all the way up through the application stack. This is Chef is a tool that's backed by commercial company Opscode. Good company in terms of working that, and very supported the community. There's a couple things that kind of point out from our work with them on that. And this is kind of how Chef works from this. So at a high level, you've got nodes, you've got servers, workstations. You can see over there, you've got your repository over there. Everything that you're doing from a workstation standpoint is going into the Get repo and is being tracked in there. Again, I'm trying to set diff all your changes from that. And there's various pieces that function on there. This basically allows, if you kind of think of this as a node is, your servers that are sitting out there. You have a Chef server which sits as sort of central command and control, and you're able to deploy changes and get changes out to all your servers that you have from that. And so this allows you to configure servers in different roles. Maybe you have a server which is just serving up Varnish or at a caching stack. Maybe you've got other servers that are handling it, Drupal and PHP. Maybe you've got other servers that are handling a database. Maybe you've got other servers that are handling Solr. So you can configure things on both everything on one server, things across multiple servers. It can mix and match the way things happen.
It can support different configurations. Yep. So recipe for one thing. So Chef, they carry the whole cooking metaphor, right? So those are called recipes. So and you're propagating not only server configuration, but such things as when we provision a server, it has the SSH keys for the group that should be authenticated to that type of machine.
Yeah. So everything that can kind of be defined in there. So there's some quick notes on here. Anybody who wants to know more specifically about this, said we're not going to do a deep dive in the tools on this, but can talk to us afterward. But there's lots of good help out there. It said a lot of stuff on Opscode site. We found them to be a great partner of ours in terms of working on this. Have been very open. We've done a number of community events together on this. They actually were out at DrupalCorn as well, speaking on that. So have been really good on that. They're also really attentive for getting changes out. So I mean, if you're out there looking at both, it's open source code and any cookbooks or recipes for that, and also being able to just get reviews and interaction with them. So what do we do from the operations standpoint? So we just needed to right the ship on this. So we just migrated over. Pretty much just went at it and started doing this. Getting all the server configurations in Get, getting all the configurations done via Chef. No more things like run books, no more like constantly getting around to what's happening on the servers. All of our server nodes out there were basically pinned to a Chef server and managed out of there. And this really allowed us to, manage, much more effectively and much more efficiently what was going on from the server setup, and kind of opened our eyes to, hey, we have to, think beyond not just what's happening from a server in the application kind of infrastructure, but how this is going to carry forward with the application itself as well. And I'll kind of point out, if you're learning about Chef, you'll often hear the term knife, which is a command in there. It's kind of sort of the drush of the Drupal world. It's knife is kind of that way to Chef in there. So what did this do for us in the end with working with our clients and everything? So, one of the things that gave us a lot of flexibility to work with organizations. So we've got some organizations who, they have, massive infrastructure already set up and in place for internal hosting. They might have a giant VMware farm, that they have, poured lots of money into to have already set up, but, not automated, or they've only automated up to essentially like an OS level and haven't carried it beyond. So it allowed us to start working with them and saying, hey, we can help you automate deployment and management of the Drupal application stack and the applications that go on that as well, and being able to start work with them. So, it doesn't mean that a client has to be out on Amazon or on Rackspace, although out of the box, Chef has knife commands for the likes of Amazon, Rackspace, Linode, I think SoftLayer, a couple others out there, plus people are building their own on that. And again, you can apply this in environments as well. So it allowed us, VMware has knife commands as well, so it allowed us to work with clients where they are, whether they're out on a hosting provider that's very known and friendly for this, or whether they're working internally, we could work and support them on these, and we could get them down the path of automation. So some clients give us the keys. They're, I think it's the stormtroopers who are drinking, and Darth Vader's the designated driver in that one. So some of them are doing that. They don't have a DevOps team, they don't have a sysadmin team, or they don't have the experience yet on that. So we're basically driving or co-piloting with them on that. Other ones we get up to speed. The big side for developers is that once we get infrastructure environments, we're going to talk a little bit more about how we do that from the local development side here. It just lets developers drop in. Like, the environments are there. Stuff's configured for Drupal. It's ready to go. They don't have to waste time or wonder, are they going to be able to connect up, get access, are permissions right, what was set up on this server as they move between projects, or they're working with that, or if there's multiple projects going on for an organization, there's a consistency with the way Drupal's being deployed and configured, and the way developers can kind of get involved and easily spin up on those projects. So this also allowed our sysadmin team to basically get a lot more time and kind of take this mode of, hey, we're going to automate everything. We can do a lot more. We can be a lot more efficient with it. It even let us take what we were doing out in the Bay Area this past year and spin it off as our own startup company doing DevOps consultancy for a lot of tech companies out there full-time. So now on to development. Yeah, we shortened this. Development sucked for developers. It wasn't fun, getting into stuff. It took too long to get into that. Onboarding into a new project took too long. So we started messing around like everybody else was doing, various things on shared environments, other things that were being done on that. Then we finally got our operations team, who was already down this path in automation with configuration management and development team, really talking together, in the same room, talking, trying to solve the same problem, saying, hey, what do we need to fix around here, and what are the problems that are at stake? So big things on here, development workflow. So inconsistent local development environments. Everybody having their own local development environment, not good. Not a good workflow through kind of the typical development staging production environments. And with Drupal specifically, everything was not in code, which we all know is a little bit of a problem to begin with. So I don't know, were there other key things that we were really running into, or?
No, so just to kind of, so everyone's kind of with us, what we're talking about is, before the developer was working, he's got a map stack, he's pulled down the database, he's searched around and scrambled maybe to find files, or maybe devel generated, maybe it worked, maybe it didn't. He's got to go find the Git repository, pull that down, and what we were finding is really this was like, maybe one guy's running PHP 5.2, one's driving 5.3, somebody else is upgraded, and what would happen is just, the local development wasn't the same as production. That either the maybe the vhost wasn't set up the same slightly. There was SSL certificates on the supposed to be on the site when it actually went to production. It just, and as a project manager, what was really odd is like some projects went very well, some other projects went very off track without really, if things worked, they worked well. And when things went to hell, they just kind of were horrible. So this is attacking that problem of getting some consistent deployment.
And kind of the last point in there, everything in code. So, this is something we just kind of woke up and we're like, must happen. Got to get configuration in there. So everybody, I'm assuming, has familiarity with the problem kind of stemming in Drupal right now of not being able to get your configuration all in code, or that some of it's sitting in the database. You go in, you start making changes in the, administratively, and you've got stuff sitting in there. Instead, then you get in this point of from a local development standpoint of trying to pull database copies down. What's the most updated database copy if not everything has been in there? So we really just woke up and said, you have to manage all the configuration. So whether you're using tools like features or you're doing some other stuff, that is the way to do it. Second, really important point there, you need to have one-step builds. You need to be able to basically press a button and build your site on your local development and not do 5 steps, not do 10 steps, not do 20 steps, not 50 steps of installing stuff on that. And we hopefully all know by now that D8 is making significant improvements in this, which we are all extremely excited about. How many people have heard of Vagrant? How many people use Vagrant? Every day? Yeah, okay. So if you haven't, Vagrant is it's open source software. Helps you create, configure, basically virtual development machines, virtual development environments. It's pretty lightweight from that standpoint. I cannot recommend it enough. If you have not checked out Vagrant, go check it out. It is a really good tool for helping with local development. So what do you use it for? So, it came out to kind of really solve problems with, and kind of look at kind of these usage scenarios where, operations, needs to do some quick testing of stuff. You want to, test across environments. You want to be able to spin up machines, quickly that are provisioned. You want to use the same way you're configuring operational environments using tools like Chef or using tools like Puppet to automate your configuration management. Same thing you're doing for an operations production environment, you want to do in your development environments. And Vagrant kind of ties at the local development level an ability to do those things and provision quickly. And you really get this idea of disposable machines. I can create a box, virtual machine from Vagrant, spin it up quickly, take a look at something, destroy the thing, and move on, do it again. And the time sink of having to kind of rebuild an environment or pull back or even go back and say, hey, which snapshotted image is the most correct one, or if you didn't snapshot images religiously, where are you at? And again, it comes back to being able to build everything from that. So the other thing is it works with a bunch of different providers. So by default, VirtualBox, but also VMware, which is a really big point. You're not really going to be running VirtualBox for production virtualization. If you are, you're braver than most. Really good for development. VMware, very solid in there, but it also work with AWS, Rackspace, Linux containers. Also has its own API. So you go out on GitHub, you're going to find ones for KVM, other ones that are out there. So, and continues to work with that. So what do we do now? So how does this all work to come together now? So bottom line, if you want to pull down a project, what do you do?
I get full origin master and Vagrant up.
Yep. That's it. Done. That site's standing up, completely built from code, entire infrastructure on a virtual machine resembling what's in production is built and done for a developer. So how many people are doing that now? Anybody? No. Yeah. This is what you want to be doing. We cannot emphasize this enough on this. So we'd use a couple things in here. So we've got a Vagrant file which defines how Vagrant configuration is going to happen. We also have a Berks file. You're like, what the hell is Berks? Okay, so Berks Shelf is a plugin that helps manage cookbook dependencies for Chef. There's other tools out there as well that do this, and you're seeing part of this also continue to evolve and build, especially looking around on GitHub. There's other folks working on some similar things that are going to do this. There are going to be other plugins coming as well. But this is what happens kind of in the ecosystem to kind of fill in the gaps and kind of make this happen. It's one that we happen to pick up on and start using and have had some good success with. So this is what we do, just as we said. We've got Git, we've got Vagrant, we've got the plugin. We pull it, stand it up, and we're done. And that gets a developer totally up and running on the project. So when we need to bring a developer up to speed on a project or jump in on something, or they're starting up a project from the get-go, or at any point in that project, that's what's going to happen. And it's going to do that, stand it up, and build the Drupal site from there. So how do we use this? We do a couple things on this. One example, we've got an audit service that we do, basically a Drupal audit analysis and in-depth review. So we do a lot of support. I said 24/7 support. People come to us to get their site supported in Drupal. So typically, they'll bring a site to us built by somebody else. Maybe they built it. Maybe they had somebody else build it. Maybe it's been built by 5 or 6 different people over time, and they can't even remember the name of the first 2 people who built it. Anybody had a site like that? Inherited a site like that? Yeah, it's fairly typical by this point on this. So one of the things we do is we review in depth that site and that infrastructure, and we look at a lot of different things. And one of the things we're doing that is we try to build the site. And so we have automated some of the process about how we test that and how we do those sort of smoke test builds using this. So it allows a developer to sit down and fire this off and see if the site will build and start looking at some information. We can tell some things right off that point. Every single deployment ever since we started doing this. So I jumped to the bottom. This means every project we work on. This is religion for us in terms of how we work. We work on automating the builds, automating the local development, and doing one-step builds on this. And as we said, this gets back to the production. So this means that when we're developing and we have a team of developers, we're not guessing what's going to happen when we push to production down the road. And this it's probably been like one of the biggest time savers.
It's really solved that problem of you get ready to push and it just fails. It just and what we were having is we would have some projects that went really well, and then we would have others that, it just, you go to push, it worked well on development, maybe it even worked well on staging. But you went to the client-side environment, something was different, and it just didn't work. And so, it's, the client's calling the project manager's on with a DevOps team or the sysadmin, like, why doesn't this work? Can't you find out what's different? And it's really unpleasant. I mean, if you've had that, no one has to tell you it's terrible.
So what we're really trying to get at is by starting a project and making it a rule that we are going to develop that project based on what that production environment is or what that production environment is supposed to be. There's no guessing at that point. Every time we're ending a sprint cycle of development, we are pushing essentially to production at that point. And we're knowing what it's going to be like. And we don't get down to the end wondering it is. And we don't get down to the end saying, oh, we're in the last phase of the project or whatever it is, and we have to now decipher what the production environment from the client is. Or we look at it and say, hey, this is not optimized for Drupal environment. Like, that's been solved from the get-go because we're not starting development without solving that problem from that. So here's what we hear. Again, we do a lot of support. We work with a lot of organizations where we're doing joint development with them. And so we've heard it all. But here are some of our favorite in terms of like why people are not going down this route or the kind of things that come. So, hey, we have great documentation. We've got that blog post with all the steps written out. You can just copy and paste them all in there. Just follow the steps. It's great. Documentation's there. I love my native environment. MAMP is it. I've configured it to the 9s. It works. It's great. That's what I'm going to go with. Virtualization. I don't want to do virtualization on my machine. It chews up too much stuff. Don't have enough resources, whatever. Don't have the time. So here's what we say. Docs. you can always have somebody who's not going to read the manual. They're just not. Like, get your stuff into code. That's what your developers are going to look at. That's what your operations team is going to look at. Don't rely on just a pure set of documentation that someone has to refer to all the time. Native environment. It's not fine. Spending time building your native environment, configuring your native environment, is wasting time. It's not what developers should be doing. Operations teams do not want to come in and support people figuring out how to configure their native environments on this stuff.
Now you're dictating what my development tools are.
I wouldn't say it's dictating development tools. I think it's more dictating process. The tools will probably change. There'll probably be some better set of tools that'll come out at some point.
Because my relationship of my local tools to the server itself that I'm working on, like things like live debugging, are intimate, right? So how am I going to resolve that? You're going to tell me I have to use a particular IDE or something?
Nope.
So what's the relationship then? Now I've got this Vagrant box that's hanging out there, right? And I have to have some sort of relationship to it. And so I've got an IDE that's not on that Vagrant box because it's virtualized. So how am I going to change those files over there? I'm going to have to go and check them in and pull them through? I want to work in a live way.
You SSH on your local and just work like you're just there.
Yeah,
it's symlink to your local files.
I use NFS. So you can export it using NFS. I know some folks that use Samba. And you export it from your VM, and then you can use all your local native tools on your workstation.
Right.
Yeah, that's how I've done it.
Yeah.
Ours are NFS.
Yep.
He's right.
Yeah.
I didn't have very good luck on Mac using Samba.
Yeah.
A buddy of mine that does development in Windows has had real good luck with it. But NFS works great.
Yeah, they're all local, all the local files. Like when we switched over, like I had the same directory that I was using for my local development, and then just like set that directory as the Vagrant directory, like everything that I work.
That's the way ours is set.
And
You work on your local.
Your, like remote debugging, like as long as the right ports and things are open on your VM, you can still use your SQL GUIs if you want to.
Yep.
You can use your remote debugging tools and clips, whatever. Right?
Yeah, there's no,
a bit more work to get it set up though initially, but once you do that one time.
Still setting it up. Still setting up my local environment to match what Vagrant is, right?
Yes, but you do it once.
yeah, and there's even work on, there's even work on that. Like if you go,
not once per project.
No, I understand what you're saying,
Yeah,
because the argument originally is, why are you spending time setting up your box? And I'm saying, well, we're still saying I'm setting up my box.
Yeah.
But you're not configuring it to be what the Vagrant
right. The point is you're not trying to make your box run like the server, essentially, from that standpoint. But, there's even work, too. Like if you go out, if you were in the earlier session, we had talked about one example of Agile project management tools is Pivotal Tracker from Pivotal Labs. Pivotal Labs actually goes and they've got some, what did they have? They had one called like Workstation, and now maybe called Sprout on GitHub, I think. But it's actually so it's an open source project that they make available where they provide all the code for like how they configure their local machines. So they do a lot of like pair programming at Pivotal, and so like for instance, like they just move people between machines. So they're almost like, hey, this machine isn't even your machine, but they can just pull a machine out of the box, run basically a chef configuration against it, and it'll configure it with all local tool, whatever IDEs they're using of choice and debugging tools of choice, and even that. So, there are even companies who are stepping to do that. The point I think we're trying to say is, you're trying to do this independent of like, you certainly don't want to say, hey, you got to use, whatever, PHP Storm versus, NetBeans or something, but.
File, right?
It is. So
yep.
I have to maintain a Vagrant file so that it works on my box. But we've said that we're not going to use Vagrant on any of the servers because that's.
So Vagrant's configuring how it's.
So we're going to use, in your case, we're using Chef to roll out those servers.
So what happens is.
So you have to maintain a Vagrant file just so I can build it on my local.
Yeah, the Vagrant file for the server setup actually uses Chef configuration within it, or Puppet configuration, or any other configuration management tool you could use. So I'm
down with the configuration.
Yeah, that same
systems. I
that same stuff. Yep.
I want that.
Yep.
But it's
it's definitely it's a change in kind of
depends on several things, right? How big is your team? Are you building sites and that's all you do? Is you build and build and build and deliver? Or are you in a mode where you maintain and that's mostly what you do, right? So there's different modes here that we're all sitting in,
Right.
and maybe not this works for all of those situations, and that's trying to apply it to me where I build some sites now and then, but mostly I'm maintaining.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's really awesome for me.
Yeah, because you can just pull down whatever, you pull down whatever current state of affairs it's in and stand it up without having to worry about, is this one on some, if you're maintaining a bunch of different sites and they're all on different PHP versions or something, along those lines, it gets a little
I
messy.
think it's kind of important to point out the Vagrant file is a lot of overhead. It's probably minor, maybe 6-7 lines
Yeah.
of code.
Now,
The
the
big
Yeah.
thing is in the chef file.
The overhead is in training the person to learn Vagrant, and that's not always something that you can overcome. In the smaller the shop and the more spread out the diverse tools are, like my guy who's doing theming, I'm not going to teach him how to do Vagrant.
My themers loved it.
Yeah.
Honestly,
you're a different sort of.
Yeah.
Themers are not themers. So when I say the word themer and you say themer, we might not mean the same thing.
I mean, like, front-end people that were not, like, they didn't want to deal with that shit, like, they loved it.
So you know what? Let's hit this topic because we've got a couple points that I'm going to make on this that because we're going to give some lessons learned off some stuff that I think address it. But this is great. I mean, it is a change. It is a change that you will find in terms of you're looking at on this stuff. We kind of again, this is some stuff directly from our developers, from other developers, and from folks on this where we've kind of been like, look, it's hard to kind of let go of what you have locally, but if you kind of take a shot at this, like, it does do this. This one, is kind of pretty direct in terms of like, we hear some people like, oh, I'm not going to virtualize, it's like a resource hog. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to basically like procure the tools that I need to do development. So here's the deal. Like, we're out there interacting, as a open source community with lots of other open source communities out there. If you're in meetups and other stuff, whether you're talking with folks, maybe they're building on Rails, maybe they're building on other, PHP stacks, maybe they're building, maybe it's the Django Python, whatever it is, developers, you're going to find these people out there doing this. We're out there in, DevOps community meetups and other ones. Lots of people are doing the same types of stuff we're doing with Drupal, and this is the way people are working. Being able to virtualize local development environments and work down this path and use some common workflows on this are the way people are working. And it makes it easier for us to work and collaborate with them, from this standpoint and do it in a professional manner. So, we do try to, emphasize that, like, having the ability or just tools at hand to do this on, your laptop, your workstation, it's worth the time and expense to do it. And it'll, make your life easier. And not having the time. A lot of people are like, hey, I don't have time. I don't have time to get people trained. I don't have time to get people up to speed. I don't have time to learn these things. What we like to say is you don't have time to do it perfectly, and neither did we. So, we started small. We don't, have to spin up some huge set of environments to do everything every time. We were able to make incremental changes. We have a process of continuous improvement that we do every week where, elements of this and other things we're trying to improve on are looked at. And the big thing is it's all in code. Like, it's in code, it's in Git, you know what's going on, you know what the configurations are, we can see problems out there, and you can get help because you can share it. You can make this available, you can put this on GitHub, lots of other people are doing similar things on GitHub, and that stuff is out there. So a couple comments here that we had in here. So yes, we like Chef. Do we say to people, yes, you must use Chef? You notice I didn't do any kind of Chef, Puppet, Salt, whatever bake-off in here. Other stuff's great too, and you can see versions of this being done, and I'll talk about a few projects that are work on doing this. We do like Chef, and we like the ops code, what they've done with the community on that. They've been very good at this. It is a pretty good tool. I think what we found that's and why you've seen a lot of this use maybe in some of the Drupal circles, that it's pretty effective at handling kind of the application level components of stuff on that. Why we think this really must be done from this. So, we're trying to push, all of us as a community with Drupal in terms of kind of state-of-the-art development. I mean, one of the things we talk about a lot with Drupal is, being able to sort of have all the sort of leading-edge capabilities that are out there. And part of leading-edge capabilities are being able to deploy and manage applications, along with the latest and greatest CMS and other platform capabilities that are trying to brought in with each new version. Deployment of a CMS platform, making it easy to do, that's a big factor, especially if you look at organizations who are using it a lot, which we're seeing, and using it in a diverse set of groups and departments and agencies across organizations, being able to deploy that. And then again, getting everything in your configuration in D8 is going to help, but you want to be able to automate it. So you're still going to want to take these kinds of steps from a DevOps practice standpoint to do that. So there's a couple projects. We have some on our own out in our Promet GitHub account for Drupal cookbooks for Chef. There's a couple other projects out there. My Planet Digital did some work with this as well for a project to kind of provide local environment configurations, again, using Vagrant and doing that. I think it was also matching with some of the Acquia stack as well. Provisio is another attempt. That's actually probably the next piece of that as well, which is doing some work. There's a number of different shops from Drupal US and I think over in Europe as well who are working on this, and this is to provide, basically goals to have, versions that are going to match, say, at least Acquia and Pantheon stacks out there from a local development standpoint. Craftwagon's another project that helps with configuration that we've been doing some work on. So here's a couple things that we've kind of learned from this. One, working on DevOps meetups that we've had experience and time doing out in the Valley and also in Chicago and in other work that we've been doing. is one, get involved. Go talk to the other communities, at a local DevOps meetup that are doing this and see the challenges they're facing. They're doing the same type of things. Their operations team are trying to automate their configurations and work on that. Their development teams are trying to get local devs smooth and get that development process smooth. They may be on different technology stacks, but often the practices and principles are very much the same. If you don't have one, if there isn't a DevOps group happening in your area, you can look to start one up. Feel free to talk to us. We're happy to help support as much as we can. We're believers in this. Often it starts small and you kind of build these up over time. And what we found is there's a lot of smart people out there, and cross-pollination and getting ideas shared out there between the communities is really good for this. And then some lessons learned on training development teams. So one of the things we started doing was training development teams at companies and organizations who are working on Drupal development how to do these kind of things, how to work locally, how to automate their builds, how to make sure that they're capturing everything in code and in a way that they can automate the builds off that, how to implement and use tools, as we saying, like Vagrant and Chef for that. So we learned a couple things. One, as we said, is don't get hung up on resource issues and other stuff. Get your team, your development teams, and your operations team, with the right resources they need to do it, and not blocked by issues from that standpoint. We try to really mix it up. We try to do both concepts and a lot of hands-on stuff. The best way to learn is by doing this and getting teams together and working on this. Have your development and operations teams work on solving a problem, on that. And as we said, a big part of it is getting everybody doing it. As you kind of mentioned before, this is whether you've got in teams that we've worked with or training, whether there's folks who are doing theming work or people who are doing custom development work or site building work on Drupal, or other piece of that is getting them sort of on the same set of process and the same set of workflows and understanding this, from that standpoint. And that's been, that kind of level of sharing, getting everybody kind of doing it. It's almost like going into a project with Drupal for the first time and you're trying to get everybody just understanding the same Drupal terminology that's at hand so that everyone's speaking the same language and they're not like, dude, what's he talking about? Node, I don't know what that means. What's this? It's getting everybody kind of up to speed on that and understanding that. And again, with that, it helps promote a lot of team unity, on that. And, we think it, helps get teams moving faster, better, producing better code, being able to meet those demands to ship, more rapidly and effectively. So the last stuff on kind of the key points to remember, process and tools are key. The workflows are key. The tools are there. As I said, we've got some good tools out there like Vagrant and Chef, and they help. Other tools, as I said, other configuration management tools, there'll probably be new ones that'll come along, and there'll be changes to ones. Even HashiCorp, who's behind the Vagrant project, has a new one out, Packer, which is a helpful tool to kind of get in between some of the in-between space between how Vagrant is working and then sort of how images work with virtualization, and kind of being able to provide some help along those lines. And bring back a little bit of capability around sort of golden image management that a lot of companies have. And then our biggest thing is start trying it. Start working on a project that you can take and say, hey, let's set a goal to make this an automated build in Drupal, and go down the process of doing that and using these tools and putting these pieces in place. So we really think, what we like to kind of talk about here is, this idea of a sustainable Drupal site or a sustainable set of Drupal sites, and how you get on there. Being able to do things like build a site from code, build all the environments from code, ship it, not get to a point where you launch and then you can't release a feature the next day, but where you launch and if the next day somebody showed up and stakeholder said, I need this next feature released, you could do it. You wouldn't be sitting there saying, I'm going to need 2 weeks to clean up the technical debt, including how we actually deploy to this, because it just got pushed over the cliff and it seemed to work and we're happy. You have confidence in knowing, again, that ability to push to production repeatedly through the process. And maintaining and supporting it for the long haul. Somebody was talking earlier about, being able to finding this helpful, from a local development process for maintaining a lot of sites, being able to go back to a site, pull it down, stand it up at that particular point in time and work on it from there and know, how that was configured and how that site was done. I think that's it from our points on that. So, again, totally welcome any questions, comments on anything. It's definitely, this is kind of a big work in process that we see for, work in Drupal, but good stuff.
Can you do a quick comparison of Chef and Promet?
I can put another hat in the ring.
Sure.
On that, and that's Ansible.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That one's, we've used that and for local development, and if you start using Chef and you're like, this is just way too big. Ansible is a great alternative. Ansible?
Ansible. Yeah, it's a
like the communication device in Android.
Yeah. So there's Puppet and Chef have been around kind of Puppet probably around the longest, then Chef, and they've the biggest of those. But Ansible, Salt's another one that's out there, and again, some of those are a little bit leaner, a little bit in some ways better for development. I think where we were going, we do a lot of again thinking about both development and production all the way through. So a tool like Chef works pretty well. From my experience, I think where we kind of felt both very good tools, both kind of surging ahead, a lot of good support, for DevOps from that. I think where we've been really happy with Chef as our tool is that, again, we feel like just some of the ways that it works and some of the ways that the community backing has been have been a little bit stronger for going all the way up through the application stack. I've seen a lot of Puppet deployments which kind of get used in big organizations, and they pretty much just deploy to the OS level and maybe to the LAMP stack level, but they're not really using it to carry all the way through configuration management. I think it gets a little challenging at times. They're definitely doing improvements in it, but that's And again, we kind of had an inside edge because we had somebody who was highly knowledgeable in it that could get us up to speed quickly.
The Chef channel on Freenode is a great place.
Yep.
And then they do trainings all over the place. I haven't been running it, but it was definitely all over the place. The Chef, there's a lot of Chef resources and training.
Yeah, if you're interested in all in it, and want to know more, definitely talk to us. We'll get you hooked up with them for sure. As I said, we found them to be really great community support. They do a lot of, trainings. We've done joint, meetups and trainings with them as well, and we'll continue to do more. So that's been part of it. It's just they've been very supportive. We felt for, that. But in some of the projects that I kind of pointed out earlier, like the Provisio project, it's the plan there is to have code for both Puppet and Chef, and maybe Ansible and Salt will follow as well. So we're not trying to be locked in as a community to any one particular tool.
I apologize, I'm the only one not getting this, but we use Chef to push out to VMs right now. Where does Vagrant fit into? What does that solve for you?
So
You're starting with Vagrant, right?
So we're not using Vagrant on the server. Vagrant is used for configuring local development for building that virtual machine on your local.
So is it I'm just not familiar with it. Is it a hypervisor?
it's not a hypervisor. It's basically it does lightweight configuration to a hypervisor instead, or multiple providers that it will work with there, of how that virtual machine is going to be configured. So I mean, it basically just speeds up the total configuration, access, and the ability to control that virtual machine on whatever hypervisor you're using. So again, whether you're using VirtualBox or VMware, but geared around local. You could use it to Vagrant up a box in the cloud, for Amazon or Rackspace. But generally, you're not at that point, and that's not really what it was built for. It was really just built for quick speed of local development environments. But you're still using all of your if you already have a bunch of chef cookbooks and recipes for configuring your production environment, what you're doing is using those same chef cookbooks and recipes to configure the virtual machine that you're going to use for the local environment for that. And Vagrant just speeds that entire process up and the management of that up. So it's as simple as once you have that done in the configuration, you can just be like Vagrant up. Stands up the virtual machine in the box. Like Chef can run, configure the box on there. You want to destroy it, it's like Vagrant destroy.
Installing the VM, pointing Chef at that IP,
Right.
the root password.
Yeah.
All of that's just abstracted by Vagrant.
Yep.
Okay.
Including the SSH stuff.
Yep.
And the file, like local file sharing stuff that you have to set up to have local files.
Does it take care of any? I mean, DNS support would be something external to that. How do you guys deal with that?
So yeah, you're doing. I mean, generally, then for the local box, I mean, you're doing some local host, typically your local host file manipulation of that.
For you?
No,
Modify your host file.
no, they don't. It's not in there yet. I'm trying to remember what Mitchell said
It's the only thing I want to do.
is coming on that. But
I haven't found a good solution for it. I tried to run my own DNS server, because most of the stuff we use, of course, for development server, and that's
Yeah.
also done through Apache Magic. So, on our dev server, you can automate everything. On our local box, you can automate everything except you need to go into, when you spin up a new site, you can do that all captured in code. The only thing you need to do is locally, you need to go in and add that line to your account.
yeah, if you've got a bunch of multiple ones that you're going to be running, you're going to be changing around. But I think I'm trying to remember. I think there are some plans to add some additional capabilities maybe down the road on that. I mean, it's pretty active development on.
And then would it take the step after your Chef configuration is complete? Is that where it ends, or does it then go and pull database files, site code down as well? Or does it stop at your dev server, your local VM is now built? You go and pull the code you want to run on there.
So that's the Berks, isn't it?
Yeah, so we use some of the plugins on that for the combination of Berks Shelf and that. So we have one for like every site that then helps drive what's going to get pulled down and built from the Drupal side of things. So no, like in our builds, no, it doesn't. I mean, it doesn't stop there because we've configured that so that it's going to just automatically pull down the site, stand it up, pull everything in for that.
Berks Shelf is taking care of that.
It helps manage dependencies between chef cookbooks
If you
and
have,
recipes to do that.
Big folders of images and other assets you're pulling, Berks Shelf will help pull all that in. So that, and he is right, I do have to enter the host file, but, I can just Vagrant up. I do a git clone, and then Vagrant up, and then the site is there.
So do you have any mixed local dev OSs like Windows and Mac and Linux, such that you have to, I'm running Vagrant on all three of those things? Or are you dictating what your developer's OS has to be?
I think we have a couple folks on Windows.
No,
No?
or not that.
Not really. I mean, we sorry, I can answer that.
Oh, no, I mean,
We dictated, look, we got this problem set, and we just eliminated by giving everybody a
I use the same on Mac, Vagrant files and the same Vagrant.
But we have an exception case.
Except Windows. Yeah, but
You could, yeah.
That- but-
some people have to use
Yeah,
Windows
the
and
question
they
is,
don't hate
yeah,
it.
I think
Some
to
people
answer
have
the,
to.
right, to answer the question is,
I haven't done myself.
yeah, that's what we did because Andy just paved the way, which when you're the boss, you can do that, so that's nice. But, it supports it across. So you could have mixed, just like you could also have mixed providers in there in terms of like VMware or VirtualBox and everything. So that is there. Now, I'm trying to remember the current version on this. So I think they just did 1.3 of Vagrant. So I know like one of the next, so there is Windows support and everything on that, and they're increasing some of that to bring that up. But, part of this when they first started into that, Windows kind of got a little bit as a second-class citizen, probably the same way that like Windows is a second-class citizen sometimes in the Drupal world of stuff. But like part of it is like a lot of the companies who were, the folks who are using this, this is like the Netflix of the world and their dev teams and lots of people who are on using Vagrant religiously on this stuff. They just weren't that much, and so they kind of drove some of the early, use case requirements around this. But yeah, being able to be portable across all the platforms is one of the advantages.
I get it, right? I got it. And I've worked on very large builds with very big teams, and it makes total sense. But I'm also thinking about people in the room that are from universities, and they are working in environments that are very different than a controlled development shop where you're highly focused on just that thing, and you can make these kind of unilateral calls. And so I'm wondering about how I'm trying to apply this to myself, right? And like now that I'm at a university, how does this work? Right?
Yeah, as we said, this is a challenge. We have this discussion, and the two ones that I probably pick the most on are universities, higher education, large distributed universities where things tend to be Department A may not be working the same way Department B is. For lots of reasons. Everybody laughs, but it's very true. And the other favorite, government agencies. This happens all the time. They do 50 projects all on Drupal inside the same agency, and you can't find two that are being done the same way because it's the government. It's just the way it works. But when we as we're having those conversations more, these are the kinds of things that are coming up to do that. There's a huge amount of inefficiency in all those things being different and the ability of resources being able to kind of work or share or operate, in these organizations that way. So trying to get some standards out to do that. So, being able to come back and say, hey, you can do local development. Maybe you need to support a couple different platforms, that people may be using, but the way they're developing, you can get down kind of a similar workflow.
We haven't solved it.
It's not a technology solvable problem per se. Some of it is an organizational. As I said, DevOps is a lot about culture. It's not that much, it's not about the tools magically solving a problem if your operations and your development teams don't get together and work together. Yeah, you got to get, that's step one.
Yeah, DevOps isn't an department.
Yeah, it's
not a role either. You can't hire DevOps. That's just not a thing anymore.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Well, it's become a recruiter buzzword. But yeah, that's a big part of the challenge is getting, being able to do that and have that thing and being able to get to that conversation point and say, well, how do we solve a problem where we have different people with different needs, but yet, we want to get some commonality out of here and have people working kind of the same way so they can kind of share and help each other more effectively. Any other questions, thoughts? And again, we're always happy to take any comments, questions, thoughts, anything on this. It's still a long and evolving area. All right. Thanks, guys.
All right, thanks.